Welcome, gentle listener, to a time of quiet contemplation. As the world outside continues its hurried pace, here we shall pause. Take a moment to adjust your position, to find that perfect spot of comfort as you prepare to rest. Feel the weight of your body sinking deeper into relaxation with each slow, even breath. The lights are dim. Perhaps a candle flickers nearby, casting soft shadows that dance like memories across ancient walls. Before we drift into tonight's tale, if you enjoy slow, sleepy history, gently tap the like button, subscribe for more nighttime journeys, and share this with someone who needs rest tonight. And tell us in the comments, what time is it where you are? Or which country are you listening from? We'd love to know. Let's settle into the soft embrace of time, where ancient stories wait like patient ghosts, whispering secrets from long ago. The day draws to a close in a small medieval village. The golden light of sunset bathes stone cottages and weathered wooden fences in a warm glow that feels like a farewell caress. Smoke rises in lazy spirals from thatched roofs, carrying with it the scent of hearth fires and simple evening meals. In the lengthening shadows, a figure moves slowly, deliberately toward a humble stable built of rough timber and dried mud. It is time for the evening routine, a daily ritual as old as the relationship between humans and their most treasured, animals. Tonight, we turn our gaze to these gentle companions of medieval life and witness the careful, quiet attention given to how horses were cared for in medieval villages. The wooden gate to the small paddock creaks softly as it opens. A man in simple homespun clothing steps inside, his movements unhurried, familiar. The evening air carries the sweet scent of hay and the earthy musk of horses. Two animals raise, their heads in recognition, not the massive war horses of knights and nobility, but the sturdy, compact working horses of common folk. Their coats catch the fading light. One a mottled brown, the other a dappled grey, with a mane that has never known the elaborate braiding of tournament steeds. The villager approaches with a gentle word, his calloused hand reaching out to stroke the brown horse's nose. This is Thomas, the village smith, and these horses belong not to him alone, but to the community. In the medieval village, few families possess the means to maintain a horse solely for themselves. These animals are shared resources, vital to survival, treated with the careful attention that all precious things receive in a world where nothing can be taken for granted. Thomas carries a worn wooden bucket filled with a mixture of crushed oats, dried peas, and a handful of herbs, a feeding practice passed down through generations. Medieval horse care follows rhythms established by necessity and observation, rather than written manuals. The animals receive feed based on their work, schedule, more substantial meals after heavy labor, lighter fare during rest days. The herbs, chamomile and mint, gathered from the edges of fields, serve to ease digestion and ward off the intestinal troubles that can claim a horse's life. While the horses eat, Thomas runs his hands along their bodies, a daily examination that requires no light beyond the sensitivity in his fingertips. He feels for swellings, for places where the skin might be hot to the touch, for any signs of discomfort or injury. The medieval understanding of veterinary medicine is practical rather than theoretical, a collection of observations and treatments handed down orally. Each village has at least one person known for their way with animals, someone whose touch seems to bring relief, whose herbal concoctions have saved valuable beasts. The horse's hooves receive particular attention in this evening ritual. Thomas lifts each foot in turn, using a small iron pick to remove packed dirt and stones. Despite popular misconceptions, medieval horses were not left unshod to stumble on rocky terrain. The village farrier, sometimes the smith himself as in Thomas's case, crafts simple horseshoes from iron bars. These are not the heavy, machine-made curves of later centuries, but lighter, hand-hammered crescents with 6 nail holes. The fitting of these shoes is an art. Too tight, and the horse will go lame. Too loose, and the shoe will be lost in muddy fields. In the dim light of the stable, Thomas's hands move with practiced certainty, checking each shoe for looseness. Tomorrow he will need to replace the one on the grey's front right hoof. He can feel the slight movement that indicates loosening, nails. The horses stand patiently, familiar with this routine that has been part of their lives since they were first broken to harness. They trust these human hands, knowing they bring relief as often as they bring work. The grooming continues with a curry comb made from strips of leather with small metal teeth. Medieval horse grooming tools are simple but effective, often crafted by the villagers themselves from materials at hand. The curry comb loosens dirt and old hair and is followed by a softer brush made from boar bristles bound to a wooden back. These implements are treasured possessions, hanging on the stable wall when not in use, sometimes passed from father to son, along with the knowledge of how to use them properly. As Thomas works the brush over the dappled coat of the grey mare, he speaks in low tones. The words themselves matter less than the rhythm and tone, an ancient communication between human and horse that soothes both parties. The medieval relationship with horses is complex, combining practical necessity with genuine affection. These animals represent significant investment and vital labor, but they are also companions in the struggle for survival, respected for their strength and endurance. The grooming serves multiple purposes beyond cleanliness and comfort. It allows for the daily inspection that might catch a developing problem, but it also strengthens the bond between caretaker and animal. For medieval working horses, this handling from an early age ensures they become accustomed to human touch and direction. Unlike the dramatic breaking of wild horses depicted in modern entertainment, medieval horse training begins with gentle, consistent handling from the first days of a foal's life. As darkness deepens across the village, Thomas spreads fresh bedding in the small stable. This is not the clean straw of romantic imagination, but often bracken, rushes, or whatever dried plant material is available. In many medieval villages, horses might be kept outside throughout the warmer months, brought into shelters only during the harshest weather. The stable itself is a simple structure, often attached to the owner's dwelling or built nearby, with walls of wattle and daub and a roof of thatch. It keeps out the worst of the wind and rain, but remains drafty by modern standards, a feature that prevents the respiratory issues that can plague horses kept in too tight quarters. Thomas pours fresh water into a wooden trough. Water management is crucial in medieval horse care, with streams, ponds, or wells serving as sources. During winter, when sources freeze, someone must break ice multiple times daily or carry water from inside heated dwellings. The horses are never allowed to drink immediately after hard work, a rule established through generations of observation that cold water in an overheated animal can cause colic or worse. The grey mare dips her muzzle into the water, drinking with slow, deliberate swallows. Thomas watches, noting how much she takes. Medieval horsekeepers become intimately familiar with their animals' habits. A change in water consumption often provides the first indication of illness. The villagers' knowledge of equine health comes not from books, few can read, but from careful observation and communal wisdom gathered over centuries. Nearby, in a small wooden chest, lies the village's collection of horse remedies. There are bundles of dried herbs, comfrey for poultices to reduce swelling, willow bark to ease pain, garlic to ward off internal parasites. Small clay pots contain salves made from beeswax, animal fat, and various plant extracts, each with specific applications for wounds or skin conditions. A leather pouch holds specialized tools, a phlegm for bloodletting, which medieval veterinary practice employs to treat numerous conditions, a wooden gag to hold open a horse's mouth for examination or administration of medicine, several lengths of clean linen for bandaging. These remedies represent a sophisticated understanding of herbal medicine developed over generations of practical experience. The medieval approach to horse health combines empirical observation with traditional practices and occasional superstition. Some treatments, like comfrey poultices for sprains, have scientific merit later confirmed by modern research. Others, like certain charms or prayers, serve more to comfort the caretaker than to heal the animal. Yet all are part of a coherent system of care. Thomas checks that the stable door can be secured against nighttime predators. Wolves still roam. The forests surrounding many medieval villages, and horses represent too valuable a resource to leave unprotected. The latch is a simple wooden mechanism, but effective. In villages where timber is scarce, horses might be brought into the family dwelling at night, sharing space with humans in an arrangement that seems strange to modern sensibilities, but was practical in its time. Beyond the stable, other preparations for the horse's care continue. In a small shed attached to Thomas's smithy lies the equipment used for these animals. Harnesses of leather aged to suppleness by years of use and regular applications of tallow. Wooden collars padded with stuffed linen to prevent rubbing. Bits of simple design made of iron with leather cheek pieces. Medieval harness technology, while less elaborate than modern equipment, represents significant craftsmanship, often the collaborative work of the village smith, the local tanner, and those skilled in leatherwork. The design of medieval horse equipment reflects both the animal's use and their welfare. Collars are shaped to distribute weight across the shoulders, rather than compressing the windpipe as earlier yoke systems did. Padded saddles protect the horse's back during the long hours of fieldwork. Each piece of equipment undergoes regular maintenance. Leather items receive applications of animal fat to prevent cracking. Wooden parts are checked for splinters that might injure. Metal components are inspected for dangerous wear or breakage. In C, the meadow beyond the village, grass grows for summer grazing and hay harvesting. Medieval horsekeeping requires careful planning of feed sources throughout the year. Spring and summer offer abundant grazing, But winter presents challenges that must be anticipated months in advance. Haymaking becomes a community effort, with the cutting, drying and storing of winter feed taking place during the precious dry days of summer. The quality of this preserved forage can determine whether horses maintain condition through the lean months or emerge weakened from winter. The village horses receive specific feeding regimens based on the work they perform. Those engaged in heavy ploughing or hauling receive supplementary feeds beyond hay, crushed oats, dried legumes, even bread soaked in ale during times of particular exertion. This feeding knowledge comes not from calculated nutritional science, but from centuries of observation. Medieval horsekeepers notice how their animals respond to different feeds, which combinations produce energy without digestive upset, how much is needed to maintain strength without waste. Thomas pauses in his evening tasks to touch the brown gelding's forehead, a moment of connection between human and animal that transcends utility. While medieval people view horses primarily as working animals, the daily intimate care creates bonds of genuine affection. Names are given, personalities acknowledged, quirks accommodated. There are stories in every village of horses that have performed beyond expectation, warned of danger, found their way home in blizzards, or shown unusual loyalty. The breeding of horses in medieval villages operates under practical considerations, rather than the refinement of bloodlines sought by nobility. Village horses are selected for hardiness, good temper, and suitability for agricultural work. Mares might be taken to neighboring villages for breeding with a suitable stallion, often requiring payment in coin or kind to the stallion's owner. The birth of a foal represents both potential wealth and vulnerability. These young animals need protection and careful raising before they can contribute to the community's work. Young horses receive training from an early age, not through the breaking methods of later centuries, but through gradual acclimatization to human contact and work expectations. A foal might first wear a simple halter, then learn to be led, later carrying small weights before eventually being introduced to harness or saddle. This methodical process, spread over several years, produces animals that are steady and reliable, rather than flighty or resistant. Thomas has completed his evening routine now. The horses have been fed, watered, examined, and settled for the night. He steps back, watching as they shift their weight slightly, finding comfortable positions on their fresh bedding. Tomorrow these animals will pull the community plough through, fields being prepared for winter wheat, their strength multiplying human labor in the endless cycle of agricultural life. For now, they rest in the quiet darkness of the stable, their breathing deep and even. As the smith turns to leave, he touches a small carving fixed to the stable doorpost, a simple horsehead shape, worn smooth by years of similar gestures. It might be a charm for protection, a token of respect, or simply an acknowledgement of these animals' centrality to village survival. Such small observances pepper medieval horse care, combining practical attention with spiritual consideration. In a world where boundaries between the natural and supernatural remain permeable, horses occupy a special place. Creatures of flesh and blood, yet also symbols of strength and freedom. The wooden door closes softly. Inside, the horses shift. In the darkness, settled into the night routine that has remained largely unchanged for centuries. Throughout the medieval village, similar scenes unfold. The careful attention to these valuable partners in survival, the quiet moments of connection between species that share the burden of existence in a challenging world. When illness strikes a village horse, it becomes a community concern. Medieval veterinary practices combine empirical treatments with rituals that might now seem superstitious. A horse with colic might receive practical interventions, walking to ease gas pain, herbal drenches to stimulate digestion, alongside prayers or protective symbols. The horse represents too significant an investment of resources to be abandoned easily. Villagers will sit through nights with sick animals, administering treatments and comfort until recovery or the sad acceptance of loss. The knowledge of treatments passes orally between generations and between communities. Traveling farriers and horse traders become important vectors of veterinary information, bringing news of effective remedies from distant places. Some monasteries maintain written records of animal treatments, though these remain inaccessible to most villagers. The accumulation of practical experience results in sophisticated understanding. Which plants soothe inflammation? Which poultices draw out infection? Which foods strengthen a weakened animal? Medieval horse care incorporates seasonal rhythms. Spring brings the shedding of winter coats, aided by more frequent grooming with specialized shedding tools made from serrated metal or bone. Summer requires attention to insect protection, herbal repellents rubbed into coats, strategic timing of work to avoid the worst of the biting flies. Autumn focuses on building condition before winter's scarcity, with supplementary feeding and reduced workloads. Winter brings its own protocols, blanketing in the coldest regions, careful monitoring of water sources, adjustments to shelter. The community aspect of medieval horsekeeping manifests in shared responsibilities. While individual families might claim ownership, the care often involves collective effort. Children might be assigned to watch grazing horses, moving them to fresh pasture and ensuring they don't stray into cultivated fields. Older villagers with knowledge of herbs might prepare poultices and drenches. Those skilled with tools maintain equipment and structures. The horses themselves often work collectively, harnessed together for ploughing or hauling particularly heavy loads. This communal approach extends to the sharing of resources. A village might maintain a common meadow specifically for horse grazing, with usage rights carefully administered. Specialized tools for horse care, expensive metal curry combs, foaling equipment, particular medicinal implements, might belong to the community rather than individuals. The cost of a breeding stallion's services might be shared among several families, each contributing according to their means and expected benefit. The relationship between medieval villages and their horses reflects the broader social structure. Just as human society has its hierarchies and divisions of labor, so too does equine care. The village's most valuable stallion receives different treatment from the elderly mare past breeding age. The horses that pull the community plough hold different status from those used primarily for transportation, yet all receive attention proportional to their contribution and needs. As night fully envelops the medieval village, the horses in Thomas's care settle into the deep rest of animals secure in routine. Their presence in the community represents continuity. These are descendants of animals that have worked alongside humans since time beyond memory. Their care practices, while adapted to local conditions and needs, follow patterns established centuries earlier and continuing for centuries to come. in the quiet darkness of countless nights like this one. The bond between humans and horses strengthens through attention and care. The horses dream their herbivore dreams, legs occasionally twitching as they run through imagined meadows. Outside, the village settles into nighttime quiet, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow these four-legged partners will once again lend their strength to human endeavors. The relationship, built on necessity but transcending it, continues its ancient dance of mutual dependence and, in its own practical way, affection. Morning will bring the next cycle of care, dawn feeding, inspection, preparation for the day's work. Harnesses will be fitted, instructions murmured, the partnership between human and horse renewed in the daily rituals of labor. But for now, in the gentle darkness, both species rest, gathering strength for tomorrow's efforts in the continuous, circular rhythm of medieval life. The candle flickers lower now, casting longer shadows across ancient walls. And in this deepening hush, another story begins to stir from time's depths, a tale of intimate rituals and quiet necessity that shaped daily existence in ways we've nearly forgotten. Let us drift now into the hidden world of how people maintained their bodies in simpler times. Water droplets catch the light of a small window, turning golden in the afternoon sun. Steam rises in lazy spirals from a wooden tub positioned near the hearth of a modest medieval home. A woman moves unhurriedly around the room, gathering dried herbs from bundles hanging from the rafters. Rosemary, lavender, chamomile, their scents mingling with the wood smoke in a fragrance that speaks of care and ancient knowing. This is not the elaborate bathing chamber of a castle, but a simple dwelling where ordinary people perform the rituals of cleanliness that have been largely forgotten by our modern understanding. Tonight, we sink into the warm, quiet world of how people bathed in medieval times. Contrary to persistent myths about medieval filth, people throughout the Middle Ages valued cleanliness. Their practices differed from our daily showers and constant soap use, but the desire to be clean, to feel refreshed, to present oneself well to others, these impulses remained constant across the centuries. The methods were adapted to the resources available, the understanding of health at the time, and the practical realities of life before running water and central heating. In the humble home we observe, water has been carried from the village well in wooden buckets, bucket by bucket, and heated in iron pots over the central hearth. This labor alone shapes the nature of medieval bathing. Water is precious, requiring significant effort to collect, transport, and heat. Full immersion baths, therefore, are not daily occurrences, but periodic luxuries, perhaps weekly for most people, more frequently for the wealthy, less often for the poorest. The woman, let us call her Eleanor, sprinkles the gathered herbs into the steaming water. Medieval people understood the properties of plants, knowledge passed through generations of practical experience. Rosemary to stimulate and refresh tired bodies, lavender to soothe and cleanse, chamomile to calm irritated skin. These were not merely for pleasant scent, but served medicinal and practical purposes in a time when the line between hygiene and healing remained fluid. Eleanor stirs the water, releasing more of the herbal fragrances into the steam-filled room. On a small table nearby lies a cloth bundle containing specialized bathing items. a piece of fine linen for washing, a small jar of soft soap made from ash and animal fat, a polished piece of bone or wood used to scrape away dead skin and impurities. These implements represent significant investment in personal care, evidence that medieval people took cleanliness seriously despite technological limitations. While the tub waits, filled with herb-infused water slowly cooling from too hot to pleasantly warm, daily hygiene has already been attended to earlier. Medieval people practiced regular hand and face washing, particularly before meals, a practice both practical and ceremonial. Special ewers and basins were kept for this purpose, often made of pottery among common folk, more elaborate metals among the wealthy. The ritual of the lavabo, hand washing before dining, was observed across social classes, combining physical cleanliness with symbolic purification. Eleanor's family, like most medieval households, keeps a washing basin near the door, a reminder to clean hands upon entering the dwelling. This practice serves functional hygiene and reflects medieval understanding of disease. While they lacked knowledge of germs as we understand them, observation had taught that cleanliness helped prevent illness. The water in this basin is changed regularly and often infused with vinegar or herbs believed to ward off sickness. The bathing tub itself is a treasured possession, a wooden vessel reinforced with metal bands, shaped somewhat like half a barrel. In more humble homes, a large cooking pot might serve double duty for bathing, or a basic tub might be constructed of wooden staves bound together, carefully maintained to prevent leaking. Wealthier households might possess metal tubs, while the truly privileged enjoyed permanent bathing chambers with tiled tubs that could be filled via primitive plumbing systems drawing from cisterns. Privacy during bathing varied across social classes and regions. In Eleanor's modest rural home, family members would take turns with the bath, often in the main room where the fire provided warmth. Simple screens might be positioned for modesty, or other family members might step outside during bathing time. Urban settings offered public bathhouses where privacy came in degrees. Private rooms for the wealthy, communal spaces divided by gender for others, though practices varied widely across Europe. These public bathhouses, particularly abundant in the earlier medieval period, served multiple functions in urban communities. Beyond basic hygiene, they provided spaces for socialization, business discussions, and therapeutic treatments. Attendants might offer services like hair washing, massage, cupping, or bloodletting. The bathhouse culture thrived especially in areas influenced by Roman traditions or Islamic practices, with their emphasis on regular bathing. By the later medieval period, however, many urban bathhouses fell into disrepute or closed entirely. This shift occurred for complex reasons: concerns about plague transmission, moral objections from religious authorities troubled by the social mixing and potential impropriety, and practical challenges of maintaining water quality in growing cities. This decline contributed to the later mischaracterization of medieval people as uniformly unwashed, a simplification that ignores the continued practice of private bathing and other hygiene methods. In Eleanor's rural setting, the bathhouse tradition never took hold. Bathing remains a domestic activity. The tub is now ready, and she slips off her linen chemise. The first sensation is always a pleasant shock, the transition from cool air to warm water, the herbs releasing their aromatic oils against her skin. She begins with a cloth, dipping it in the water and applying it to her face in gentle motions. Medieval bathing followed a general pattern, beginning with the face and working downward, paying special attention to visible areas like hands, arms, and neck. The soap Eleanor uses differs significantly from modern products. Medieval soap making combined animal fats or vegetable oils with an alkali substance derived from wood ash, often with herbs or scent agents added. The resulting material was softer than modern soap bars, more like a paste that would be applied to the washing cloth rather than directly to the skin. These soaps effectively remove dirt and oil, but lack the detergent properties and intense fragrances of contemporary products. Wealthy households might possess specialized soaps, imported from centers of production like Castile in Spain, renowned for their fine texture and pleasant scents. Perfumed oils might also be added to bath water or applied to the skin afterward. These luxuries remained inaccessible to most common people who relied on locally produced soap and native herbs for fragrance. As Eleanor bathes, she pays particular attention to her hair, which is washed less frequently than the body, perhaps monthly rather than weekly. Medieval hair care involved specialized treatments, washing with steeped herbs like soapwort that contain natural saponins, rinsing with vinegar solutions to remove residue and add shine, applying oils for conditioning, combs made of bone, wood, or horn, detangled and distributed natural oils through the hair. These implements were often elaborately carved and considered personal treasures passed through generations. After washing, Eleanor uses the scraper, known as a strigil in some regions, adopting the Roman term for this ancient tool, made of polished bone, wood, or metal, depending on the owner's wealth. This curved implement removes dead skin and opens pores. The practice, inherited from classical bathing traditions, served both cleansing and circulatory purposes. The medieval understanding of health embraced the concept of balance within the body. Proper bathing with tools like the strigil was believed to help maintain this equilibrium. For medievalists considering the concept of cleanliness, bathing extended beyond the physical act of washing to encompass concepts of spiritual and moral purity. The physical cleansing of the body paralleled the soul's purification, a connection made explicit in baptismal rites and various religious ceremonies involving ritual washing. This association sometimes created tension. Excessive attention to bodily cleanliness could be viewed as worldly vanity, while neglect might indicate spiritual laziness. Religious orders developed their own bathing regulations, balancing practical hygiene with concerns about modesty and ascetic values. Some monastic rules prescribed regular bathing schedules, while others limited bathing frequency. Communal bathing within religious houses followed strict protocols to maintain propriety. The sick often received more frequent bathing privileges, reflecting the medieval understanding of hygiene's role in healing. For ordinary people like Eleanor, bathing practices reflected regional cultures and seasonal realities. In winter, full immersion baths became less frequent due to the cold and the increased effort required to heat water. During these months, dry cleaning methods gained prominence, using linen cloths to wipe the body, applying scented powders to absorb oils, changing undergarments more frequently. These alternatives maintained basic hygiene when weather made water-based bathing difficult or dangerous. Summer offered different bathing opportunities. Rural communities often used natural water sources, streams, rivers, ponds for bathing. During warmer months, these communal bathing spots typically observe gender separation through designated areas or alternating times. Swimming, not yet developed as a recreational skill taught to most people, remained less common than simple immersion and washing. Still, summer water activities provided both hygiene and relief from heat, particularly for those engaged in physical labor. Eleanor's bath continues, the water cooling gradually around her. She takes her time, understanding this as both practical necessity and restorative ritual. From childhood, she was taught the proper methods, how to conserve the precious warm water, which herbs served which purposes, how to clean thoroughly, with minimal resources. These lessons passed from mother to daughter created continuity in hygiene practices across generations, with regional variations developing based on available plants and local customs. When she finishes bathing, Eleanor does not immediately empty the tub. Medieval water conservation practices meant bath water would be reused. Husband would bathe after wife, children after parents, with perhaps a quick reheating between users. Only after serving the entire family would the water be repurposed again for laundry or discarded. This efficiency reflected both the labor involved in water collection and heating, and the general medieval approach to resources, using and reusing until full utility was extracted. After bathing, medieval people paid careful attention to the transition back to cooler air. Linen towels, simple for common folk, sometimes embroidered or decorated among the wealthy, dried the body. Sitting near the fire allowed for gradual cooling, as sudden temperature changes were believed to invite illness. This period after bathing often involved additional grooming practices, applying scented oils to the skin or hair, trimming nails, or treating specific skin concerns with appropriate remedies. Beyond the full bath ritual, medieval daily hygiene involved regular partial washing. Faces and hands were cleaned multiple times daily, particularly before meals and after work. A small basin and pitcher kept within easy reach facilitated this routine practice. Teeth were cleaned using cloths, herbal preparations, or twigs with frayed ends that served as primitive brushes. Mint, sage, and other aromatic herbs freshened breath and were believed to strengthen gums and prevent tooth decay. For travelers unable to access proper bathing facilities, medieval people developed portable hygiene solutions. Small containers of scented waters allowed for refreshing the face and hands. Herb-infused vinegars cleaned and deodorized. Linen cloths dampened with these solutions wiped away travel dust. Combs, tooth cleaning implements, and small containers of scented oils might be carried in leather pouches by those of sufficient means, ensuring basic grooming could continue during journeys. Medieval markets offered various hygiene products, though typically not in dedicated shops. Soap makers sold their wares alongside other household necessities. Herb merchants provided the botanicals needed for bathing and personal care. Specialized grooming tools like combs and scrapers might be purchased from bone workers or wood carvers. For those unable to afford purchased items, knowledge of which plants could substitute for soap or provide pleasant scents enabled even the poorest to maintain basic cleanliness. Seasonal changes influenced not only bathing frequency, but also the composition of bathing preparations. Spring herbs like violets and primrose found their way into noble baths, while summer offered lavender and roses. Autumn bathing might incorporate apples or wine leaves with their natural acids. Winter preparations often included warming herbs like rosemary and pine. These seasonal adaptations reflected both practical availability and medical theories about appropriate treatments for different times of year. The connection between bathing and health extended beyond basic cleanliness in medieval understanding. Certain bath additives were prescribed for specific ailments: oat water for skin irritations, steeped chamomile for inflammation, wine baths for strengthening the constitution. Specialized therapeutic baths might be recommended by practitioners of medieval medicine, with elaborate preparations of herbs, minerals, or animal products, believed to treat everything from joint pain to melancholy. For the wealthy, bathing became an elaborate social ritual by the later medieval period. Noble households might maintain permanent bathing chambers equipped with wooden or metal tubs, sometimes with primitive heating systems running beneath tiled floors. Servants prepared scented waters with exotic imported spices and flowers. Music might accompany bathing, and light refreshments might be served to bathers. These luxurious practices appear in illuminated manuscripts and literature of the period, showcasing bathing as an indicator of refinement. Royal courts developed particularly elaborate bathing ceremonies. The preparation of the monarch's bath involved multiple servants with specific roles, testing water temperature, adding appropriate scents and medicinal herbs, attending the royal person during bathing, and managing the complex etiquette surrounding this intimate yet ceremonial activity. These rituals combined practical hygiene with displays of status and adherence to medical theories about maintaining royal health. Returning to Eleanor's more modest setting, we see her emerging from her bath, wrapped in linen cloth. The physical sensation of cleanliness brings both practical and psychological comfort. Skin refreshed, tension eased, a momentary respite from daily labor. She will dress in clean undergarments, the linen chemise that lies closest to the skin being washed more frequently than outer clothing. This pattern of regular linen changing contributed significantly to medieval hygiene, operating alongside less frequent full-body washing. Medieval undergarments, designed for absorbency and comfort, played a crucial role in personal hygiene. These linen pieces, worn directly against the skin, collected body oils and could be washed more easily than outer garments of wool or other less washable materials. People of means possessed multiple sets of underclothing, allowing for regular changes even when laundry was performed only periodically. This system of clean body, clean linen formed the foundation of medieval personal hygiene. While Eleanor prepares the bath for the next family member, her husband returns from working in the fields. His daily washing has already occurred at the village fountain. Medieval agricultural workers often cleaned hands, faces, and arms multiple times throughout the day, particularly during dusty or muddy work. Public water sources in villages and towns served important hygiene functions, providing accessible washing facilities that complemented the more private bathing rituals conducted at home. As afternoon transitions to evening in this medieval household, each family member will take their turn with the bath water, participating in this ritual of cleanliness that connects them to broader traditions spanning centuries. The practice varies little between social classes in its essential elements, differing primarily in luxury of materials, frequency, and elaborateness, rather than basic purpose or method. The misconception of medieval filth so persistent in modern imagination, stems partly from later Renaissance and Enlightenment writers eager to distinguish their own era from the backward Middle Ages. It also derives from changing medical theories. By the 16th and 17th centuries, some physicians had begun advising against frequent bathing, believing that water, especially hot water, opened the pores dangerously to disease. This later shift away from bathing has been incorrectly backdated in popular understanding, obscuring the regular hygiene practices of authentic medieval life. Archaeological evidence supports the historical record of medieval cleanliness concerns. Excavations of medieval settlements reveal bathing implements, drainage systems for wastewater, and sophisticated facilities in monasteries and castles. Personal grooming tools appear frequently in burial goods and household inventories. Traces of soap production and herbal processing facilities indicate widespread manufacturing of hygiene products across medieval Europe. The varied geographical expressions of medieval bathing culture reflected both climate and cultural influences. Southern European regions maintained more of the Roman bathing traditions, with greater emphasis on immersion. Northern areas, with colder conditions, developed steam bathing practices, forerunners of the sauna, alongside immersion methods. Eastern influences brought hammam-style bathing to parts of medieval Spain and Sicily. These regional variations created a diverse tapestry of cleanliness practices united by common concern for hygiene. By evening's end, all members of Eleanor's family will have bathed. The used water, still valuable, might water garden plants or be used for cleaning floors. The herbs now spent join the compost pile that will eventually enrich the garden where future bathing herbs will grow. The tub is dried and stored until next week's bathing day. Clean linen undergarments and head coverings provide continued freshness in the days between full baths. As candles burn low and the medieval household prepares for sleep, they carry with them the physical comfort of cleanliness, skin softened by herbal waters, hair arranged neatly under nightcaps, bodies wrapped in fresh linen. The day's accumulated dirt has been washed away, yesterday's concerns symbolically cleansed along with the physical body. This ritual, repeated in countless variations across medieval Europe, connected ordinary people to ancient traditions of purification and renewal while serving the practical needs of bodily care. Medieval bathing practices remind us that human desires for cleanliness, comfort, and dignity transcend technological limitations. Without running water, without manufactured soaps, without heated bathrooms, people nevertheless found effective ways to maintain hygiene. They adapted available resources to create systems of cleanliness that served both practical and spiritual needs. The methodical, resource-conscious approach to bathing reflected broader medieval values: the careful stewardship of limited resources, the integration of practical necessity with ritual meaning, the passing of knowledge through demonstrated practice rather than written instruction. In the quiet, darkening room, Eleanor covers the last embers of the fire. Tomorrow will bring new work, new dirt, new needs for cleansing. The cycle continues, as it has for generations before and will, for generations to come. This intimate ritual of water and herbs, of human hands attending to the body's need for care and renewal. In this simple act of bathing, medieval people affirmed their humanity, their dignity, and their place in the continuous stream of human experience. As we drift away from Eleanor's humble home, the scent of lavender and wood smoke lingering in our imagination, we carry with us a more nuanced understanding of medieval hygiene. Not the caricature of filth so often portrayed in popular media, but a sophisticated system of cleanliness adapted to available resources and contemporary knowledge. These bathing practices, now largely forgotten, connected medieval people to both practical necessity and timeless human desires for renewal, comfort, and care of the body that houses the spirit. The air grows cooler as night deepens around us, and through the gathering darkness, another voice begins to whisper of homes unlike our own, of spaces defined not by what they contained, but by what they lacked. Let us journey now to the threshold of medieval dwellings and discover a curious absence that shaped how people lived. Twilight settles over a small cluster of dwellings nestled against the protective embrace of ancient forest. Smoke curls lazily from thatched roofs, carrying the scent of the evening meal and hearth fires that have burned in this place for generations uncounted. As darkness grows, families gather inside their humble homes, the day's labor complete. A traveler passing through might notice something curious about these dwellings, something absent rather than present. The openings that lead into each home lack the familiar barrier we take for granted. There are no hinged panels of wood, no locked entryways guarding the threshold. Tonight, we explore the quiet truth of why medieval villages had no doors. To understand this absence, we must first reorient our modern understanding. When we speak of medieval homes without doors, we are not describing dwellings entirely open to the elements and passers-by. Rather, we enter a world where the concept of door itself differed fundamentally from our contemporary understanding. The threshold existed, the entrance was acknowledged, but the solid, hinged, lockable door as we conceive it today was often absent from the homes of common villagers throughout much of the medieval period. In place of doors, many medieval homes employed simpler barriers, heavy curtains of woven fabric or felt, lightweight wooden screens that could be lifted into place, or panels of woven branches that provided basic separation from the outside world. These coverings offered some protection from weather and casual intrusion, while consuming far fewer resources than the substantial wooden doors found in wealthier establishments or communal buildings. Let us approach one such dwelling as evening falls. The home belongs to a family named Fletcher, common folk who work the surrounding fields. Their cottage stands low against the landscape, walls of wattle and daub, a mixture of woven branches plastered with clay and straw, supporting a roof of carefully bundled thatch. The entrance is a simple rectangle cut into the wall, its threshold raised slightly above the packed earth floor to prevent water intrusion during rain. Across this opening hangs a heavy woolen curtain, dyed a faded blue from woad plants that grow near the village stream. The fabric has been treated with tallow to increase its resistance to moisture, though years of smoke from the interior hearth have given it a darker hue than its original color. This curtain represents the primary boundary between home and world for the Fletcher family. Not a door as we understand it, but a flexible, adaptable barrier that serves many of the same functions while reflecting medieval realities. Why this preference for fabric over wood? The answer lies partly in resource availability. In many regions, particularly those where deforestation had occurred through centuries of human habitation, wood of sufficient quality and quantity for door construction remained scarce. Large, flat pieces of wood without significant warping required trees of substantial size and skilled processing, resources often reserved for community structures, churches, and the homes of wealthy landowners rather than common dwellings. The economics of medieval village life further reinforced this pattern. Creating a proper wooden door required specialized knowledge and tools. The work of carpenters, who might need payment in coin rather than the bartered goods or labor that formed the backbone of medieval exchange among common folk. Metal hinges and latches represented additional expense, often beyond the means of ordinary households. The fabric curtain, in contrast, could be produced domestically using widely available materials and skills. Inside the Fletcher home, the curtain serves multiple purposes beyond simple separation from the outside. During daylight hours, it can be tied aside to admit precious light into the dim interior, where windows, if present at all, tend to be small openings covered with oiled parchment or thin animal horn rather than glass. In summer, the curtain allows air circulation while still providing privacy and preventing livestock from wandering inside. In winter, it can be supplemented with additional layers or temporarily replaced with heavier materials to better retain precious heat from the central hearth. The very structure of medieval peasant homes influenced this doorless design. Many dwellings featured a linear layout with the entrance opening into a main room containing the hearth and perhaps one or two additional chambers beyond. Animals often shared this space, particularly in colder months, occupying the end nearest the entrance. This arrangement created natural zones of increasing privacy and warmth as one moved deeper into the structure, reducing the need for solid barriers at the threshold. The hearth itself, the literal and symbolic heart of the medieval home, affected entrance design. Positioned centrally and vented through a hole in the roof rather than a proper chimney in most common dwellings, the fire required consistent airflow. The flexible entrance covering facilitated this ventilation system, allowing for adjustment based on wind conditions and temperature. A solid door might have interfered with this careful balance of draft and containment that kept the life-sustaining fire burning properly. Beyond practical considerations, the absence of doors reflected social realities of medieval village life. These communities functioned through intense interdependence and collective monitoring. The semi-permeable boundaries between public and private spaces reinforced community cohesion. Neighbors could call to each other without formal knocking. Procedures, awareness of others' activities created mutual accountability, and the sounds and smells of daily life flowed between dwellings as naturally as the villagers themselves moved through communal spaces. This is not to suggest that privacy did not exist or was not valued in medieval communities. Rather, privacy operated differently, achieved through social conventions rather than physical barriers. Visitors announced their presence through vocal calls or deliberately audible approach. Neighbors respected the understood boundaries of others' domestic spaces, despite the lack of lockable entryways. The curtained threshold created a recognized boundary that, while physically permeable, carried social significance that members of the community observed. The Fletcher family, like their neighbors, maintains additional methods of securing their home when necessary. At night, or when traveling to distant fields or market towns, they might place a simple wooden bar across the interior of the entrance, preventing the curtain from being easily pushed aside. A large stick leaned against the exterior curtain signals absence, both a practical deterrent and a social communication to neighbors that the dwelling stands empty and perhaps warrants occasional checking. For medieval villagers, security concerns differed substantially from modern preoccupations. The threat of stranger intrusion remained relatively low in small, isolated communities where unfamiliar faces were immediately noted and monitored. More significant dangers came from fire, weather, or conflicts with neighboring villages over resources, threats against which a wooden door offered little protection compared to community vigilance and mutual aid systems. The relationship between doors and property concepts also influenced medieval practices. In a society where individual possession of land and resources was less firmly established than collective usage rights and obligations, the aggressive assertion of exclusive access through heavy, locked doors would have seemed both unnecessary and potentially antisocial. The modest barriers employed instead reflected a world where boundaries existed but remained negotiable and permeable in accordance with community needs. This pattern varied across medieval Europe, with regional differences shaped by climate, available materials, and cultural influences. Northern regions with harsher winters might employ heavier entrance coverings or develop specialized designs like the inverted L-shaped entry passages found in Norse dwellings, which minimized heat loss while still avoiding the resource requirements of proper doors. Mediterranean areas with milder weather and different architectural traditions sometimes featured more substantial doors, yet maintained the principle of permeable boundaries through frequent opening during daylight hours. Urban settings presented different considerations than rural villages. Town dwellings, often built with shared walls and opening directly onto busy streets, developed more substantial doors earlier than their rural counterparts. The anonymous nature of urban life, with its greater population density and movement of strangers, created security concerns that rural communities rarely faced. Even so, many urban dwellers of modest means used simplified door designs, lightweight wood panels or reinforced fabric, rather than the substantial constructions found in wealthier households. As evening deepens in our medieval village, the A. Fletcher family prepares for night. The mother adjusts the entrance curtain, ensuring it falls completely across the opening to retain precious heat from the banked hearth fire. The interior grows darker, illuminated only by the dim red glow of coals and perhaps a small rushlight, a reed dipped in animal fat, if any task requires completion before sleep. The darkness itself provides another layer of security, as the family's movements become invisible from outside, while their ears remain alert to any unusual sounds from the village pathway. The communal aspect of medieval security extended through the night hours. Villages often designated night watchmen, rotating responsibility among able-bodied adults who patrolled common areas during darkness, alert for fire hazards, wandering animals, or rare human intruders. This shared vigilance further reduced the need for individual households to fortify their dwellings with substantial doors and locks. The community itself formed the first and most important security perimeter. Archaeological evidence supports this understanding of medieval entrances. Excavations of peasant dwellings throughout Europe frequently reveal threshold stones and post holes indicating entrance locations, but often lack the substantial hardware, large hinges, locks, or heavy latch mechanisms that would suggest doors comparable to modern constructions. Where wood has preserved in exceptional circumstances, we sometimes find evidence of lightweight movable barriers rather than substantial hinged doors. Historical records similarly indicate a distinction between common dwellings and more elite structures regarding door construction. Manorial accounting documents and inventories frequently list metalwork and carpentry expenses for doors in manor houses, churches, and communal storage buildings, while ordinary dwellings merit no such mention. The substantial doors that did exist often protected communal resources rather than individual households. The village church with its religious treasures, the mill with its essential machinery, or the Lord's granary containing collected taxes in kind. For travelers accustomed to modern conceptions of privacy and security, the doorless village might have seemed strangely exposed, yet this arrangement created its own forms of security through visibility and community awareness. A stranger approaching a home would be observed by multiple neighbors. Activities within dwellings remained semi-public, creating accountability through observation. The social fabric itself, with its complex web of relationships and mutual monitoring, provided protections that physical barriers could not. The Fletcher home, like others in the village, displays another feature related to this doorless design: a multi-purpose use of entrance spaces. The area just inside the threshold often contains tools for daily work, storage containers for items needing cooler temperatures, and sometimes a small bench where family members remove muddy footwear before moving deeper into the dwelling. Without a swinging door requiring clearance, this transitional space can serve practical functions while still allowing passage in and out. Animals, too, move more easily through these flexible boundaries. Chickens might wander in and out during daylight hours, clearing the dirt floor of food scraps and insects. The family dog patrols the threshold space, alert to visitors, while free to exit when nature calls. In some regions, smaller livestock like young goats or lambs requiring special care might be temporarily housed just inside the entrance during harsh weather, benefiting from the dwelling's warmth while being contained in the least private portion of the home. The transition from doorless designs to more substantial entrances occurred gradually across medieval Europe, influenced by multiple factors. Increasing prosperity in some regions provided resources for better construction. Growing concerns about property demarcation as land use systems evolved created desire for more defined boundaries. Improving metalworking techniques made hinges and latches more affordable. Changes in heating technology, particularly the development of proper chimneys, reduced the need for flexible ventilation at entrances. By the later medieval period, doors had become more common in peasant dwellings. Across many regions, though still simpler than their counterparts in elite structures, these later medieval doors often used vertical plank construction fastened with wooden crosspieces. Techniques requiring less specialized woodworking than the frame and panel designs found in wealthier settings. Hardware remained minimal, with leather hinges sometimes substituting for metal, and simple wooden latches rather than locks serving as closure mechanisms. The evolving doorway reflects broader changes in medieval society, increasing emphasis on individual households rather than communal identity, growing material prosperity, allowing for more substantial construction, and shifting concepts of privacy that began to more closely resemble modern expectations. Yet these changes occurred unevenly, with many villages maintaining older patterns of flexible boundaries well into periods when others had adopted more substantial threshold definitions. Throughout these evolutions, the threshold retained special significance in medieval consciousness. Folk practices surrounding house entrances persisted regardless of the physical barrier employed. Herbs hung above openings for protection, symbolic markings placed on lintels, specific rituals observed when crossing between outside and inside. The transition between public and private, between community space and family domain, carried meaning beyond its physical manifestation. In our medieval village, night has fully arrived. The Fletcher family sleeps in the deepening darkness, bodies arranged around the residual warmth of the hearth. The entrance curtain moves slightly with the night breeze, occasionally revealing glimpses of starlight or the distant glow of the night watchman's lantern as he makes his rounds. The family rests secure, not because of locked doors and impassable barriers, but because they exist within a social framework that provides protection through connection rather than isolation. The absence of doors in medieval villages reminds us of fundamentally different conceptions of community, security, and personal space. Rather than reflecting primitive living conditions or inability to create better barriers, this architectural choice embodied values and practical considerations specific to its time. The prioritization of resource conservation, the need for flexible living arrangements, the centrality of community monitoring to social order, and a different relationship between private and public than modern minds assume. As we continue our journey through this sleeping village, we might notice other thresholds similarly defined by fabric, light wooden screens, or woven barriers. Each represents not a technical deficiency, but an adaptation to particular circumstances, an elegant solution, balancing limited resources against practical needs, individual desires against communal expectations, protection requirements against daily convenience. The medieval home without a door stands as testament to a society that found security not primarily through physical barriers, but through social cohesion. In these communities, knowing one's neighbors, being known by them in turn, and maintaining the complex reciprocal relationships that defined village life provided protections more valuable than locks and boards. The permeable threshold reflected this reality, not an absence of privacy concerns, but their fulfillment through different means than physical exclusion. As dawn approaches, the village begins to stir. The Fletcher household awakens to a new day. The entrance curtain is tied back, opening the dwelling to morning light and the activities of the community. The threshold between inside and outside becomes even more permeable, allowing free movement as daily tasks begin. This opening is neither threatening nor unusual to medieval sensibilities. It simply marks the transition from the night's enclosure to the day's connection, another rhythm in the complex patterns of village life. The doorless medieval dwelling offers modern minds a window into different conceptions of space, community, and security. These homes remind us that our contemporary emphasis on strict boundaries, locked entrances, and physically enforced privacy represents just one approach among many possible arrangements of human habitation. The medieval village, with its flexible thresholds and socially maintained boundaries, achieved its own forms of safety and privacy despite, or perhaps because of, its more permeable domestic architecture. As we depart this village of curtained entrances and communal vigilance, we carry with us a more nuanced understanding of medieval domestic life. Not a more primitive version of our own arrangements, but a different system entirely, one adapted to its own resource constraints, social structures and cultural values. The absence of doors becomes not a lack, but a presence of alternative solutions, testament to human ingenuity in creating home spaces that serve fundamental needs while reflecting the specific circumstances of their time and place. The light of morning now illuminates the village fully, revealing the simple curtains and screens that mark thresholds between dwellings and the world outside. These flexible boundaries continue their centuries-old function, permitting the flow of light, air, and community that sustained medieval life. In their gentle movement with the morning breeze, they whisper stories of a world where security came from being known rather than being barricaded, where home was defined less by walls and doors than by hearth fire and family presence. The night deepens. One final tale remains, quiet and curled in time's corner, waiting gently to be heard. As we drift through the darkest hours, let us turn our gaze to those who moved silently through the shadows of grand halls and humble homes alike. The hands that built medieval life from dawn to dusk. Footsteps echo softly on worn stone floors, well before dawn breaks over the manor house. A slight young woman moves through the shadowed kitchen, stoking the banked embers of last night's fire into fresh flames. Her movements are practiced, efficient, the result of years performing these same tasks. She is Agnes, a kitchen servant, in a moderately prosperous household, one of many whose labour forms the invisible foundation upon which medieval life is built. While history remembers kings, knights, and ladies, it often overlooks these essential figures. Tonight, we turn our attention to the forgotten lives of medieval servants. Agnes begins her day in darkness, as she has every day since childhood. The medieval servant's schedule follows neither clock nor personal preference, but the requirements of the household and the rhythms of nature. In winter, this might mean rising at 4 in the morning. In summer, even earlier to take advantage of all available daylight. Unlike modern work with its defined hours and boundaries, medieval service blends seamlessly with existence itself. Not something one does, but something one is. The kitchen where Agnes works sits slightly apart from the main house, a common arrangement that reduces fire risk to the primary structure. Built of stone, with a high ceiling designed to capture smoke from the large hearth, it contains the tools of daily sustenance: iron pots hanging from hooks, wooden spoons and bowls stacked on rough shelves, flour and grain stored in barrels raised off the ground to discourage vermin. This space represents Agnes's primary domain, though her duties extend throughout the household. As she builds the fire that will cook the day's meals, Agnes is joined by other early rising servants. Thomas, a sturdy boy of 14 who hauls water and performs heavier tasks. Eleanor, an older woman who oversees the dairy, and Martin, who tends the household's horses and assists with butchery when needed. Their greetings are quiet, minimal. Conversation remains limited until essential morning tasks are underway. Energy must be conserved for the long hours ahead. These servants represent different paths into service, reflecting the diverse origins of medieval household staff. Agnes came to this position through family connection. Her mother served the same household before illness claimed her 3 winters. Ago. Thomas was placed in service as part of a formal agreement when his family could no longer support all their children. Eleanor entered service after being widowed, finding security in household employment when few other options existed for an older woman without family support. Martin's service represents partial payment of his father's debt to the manor lord. Medieval. Servitude rarely resulted from single causes, but from complex intersections of economic necessity, family circumstance, and social obligation. Unlike the chattel slavery of later periods, medieval domestic service represented a recognized, if humble, occupation with defined, though limited, rights and social position. Servants received compensation, sometimes in wages, more often in room, board, clothing allowances, and occasionally small gifts at religious festivals. The arrangement provided basic security in a world where starvation remained a constant threat for those without protected positions. As day breaks fully, the hierarchy of the servant world becomes more visible. The steward arrives to review the day's requirements, a man of middling years who occupies the crucial position between the Lord's family and the staff who serve them. His authority over servants is nearly absolute. His responsibility to ensure the smooth operation of the household, equally weighty. The steward represents the highest achievement possible within service ranks. A position of respect, relative comfort, and significant influence despite its fundamentally subordinate nature. Below the steward stand various specialized servants, whose status depends on proximity to the master's family and the skill their position requires. The lady's personal attendant enjoys higher status than kitchen workers. The chamberlain who manages household finances ranks above the grooms who tend horses. This intricate hierarchy creates a complex social world within service itself, complete with its own customs, prejudices, rivalries, and alliances invisible to those outside the servant class. Agnes occupies a middle position in this hierarchy, not the lowest kitchen drudge assigned to merely turning spits or scrubbing pots, but not yet entrusted with the more prestigious tasks of preparing elaborate dishes for the high table. Her responsibility this morning focuses on preparing breakfast for both the household above stairs and the servants themselves. The fare differs significantly between these groups: finer wheat bread, fresh eggs, and spiced wine for the family, coarser bread, pottage made from vegetables, and perhaps a small amount of salt pork for the staff. This distinction in food quality and quantity represents one of many physical manifestations of the social divide between server and served. Medieval service involved not just labor, but visible, embodied reminders of status difference. Servants ate different foods, wore different clothing, occupied different spaces within the household, and adhered to different behavioral expectations than those they served. These distinctions were not incidental, but essential to maintaining the social order that medieval society considered divinely ordained. As Agnes prepares the morning meal, her movements display the embodied knowledge characteristic of medieval service. No written recipes guide her work. Cooking knowledge passes orally from experienced servants to newcomers through demonstration and practice. Her measurements rely not on standardized cups or scales, but on memory and physical judgment. A handful of this, a pinch of that, kneading dough until it feels right, rather than for a specified time. This tactile, experiential knowledge characterizes all aspects of service, creating a form of expertise invisible precisely because it resides in bodies, rather than documents. The morning progresses with the careful choreography typical of a well-run medieval household. Servants move between tasks with practiced efficiency, their interactions governed by both formal hierarchy and informal relationships developed over years of shared labor. Agnes transfers prepared food to the hall where breakfast will be served, careful to remain as unobtrusive as possible when members of the family are present. Medieval service ideals prized invisibility. The best servant accomplished necessary tasks without drawing attention to themselves or disrupting the family's activities. This ideal of invisibility extended beyond physical presence to voice and opinion. Servants were expected to maintain a careful neutrality in household matters, neither offering unsolicited views nor appearing to notice sensitive conversations occurring in their presence. This required a complex performance of attentiveness and obliviousness, being alert enough to anticipate needs while projecting an impression of not hearing or understanding matters beyond their station. The servant's body itself became a carefully managed instrument, trained to occupy space without claiming attention. After the family finishes breakfast, Agnes returns to the kitchen to help prepare more substantial midday and evening meals while also attending to other tasks, preserving summer fruits, monitoring stores for signs of spoilage, and participating in the endless cleaning that occupies much of servant life. The medieval household, without modern sanitation or appliances, required constant labor to maintain even basic standards of cleanliness and order. This maintenance work, overwhelmingly performed by female servants, created the foundation that enabled the more visible activities of medieval elite life. The gendered division of servant labor reflected broader medieval social structures. Female servants primarily performed tasks related to food preparation, childcare, textile work, and interior cleaning. Male servants handled exterior maintenance, animal care, heavy transport, and protective functions. Some positions, particularly higher status roles like steward or household chaplain, remained exclusively male, while others like laundress or nurse were solely female. This division both reflected and reinforced gender expectations throughout medieval society. Despite long hours and physically demanding work, servants like Agnes were not permitted to display fatigue or discomfort while performing their duties. The idealized servant maintained pleasant efficiency regardless of personal circumstance. An early version of emotional labor that required suppressing individual needs in service of others' comfort. This aspect of service often proves most difficult for modern minds to comprehend. Not just the physical demands, but the requirement to render one's own humanity secondary to role fulfillment. The medieval servant's personal space reflected their subordinate position. Agnes shares sleeping quarters with 3 other female servants. A small chamber adjacent to the kitchen that allows them to respond quickly when needed, even during night hours. Their beds are simple pallets rather than the raised bedsteads used by the family. Personal possessions remain minimal, perhaps a spare garment, a small religious token, occasionally a modest trinket received as gift or payment. Privacy exists only in brief moments stolen between tasks or in the pre-dawn darkness before the day's work begins. Clothing marked servant status, visibly. Agnes wears a simple linen kirtle, a basic gown, covered by a sturdy apron while working. The fabric is coarser than that worn by the family, the cut more practical than fashionable, the colour usually undyed or a simple earth tone rather than the brighter hues reserved for higher status. Head coverings for female servants typically conceal hair completely, both for practical cleanliness and as a marker of modest station. This dress code functioned as a constant visual reminder of social position for both the servants themselves and those they served. Religious observance provided one of the few breaks in the servant's ceaseless work cycle. Even the most demanding, households generally permitted servants to attend Sunday Mass and observe major religious festivals, though often with abbreviated leisure compared to their employers. These religious occasions offered rare opportunities for servants to interact with the broader community, to briefly occupy spaces as worshippers rather than servers, and to participate in celebrations that temporarily suspended ordinary labor demands. Beyond these structured religious occasions, servants created their own moments of community. In the brief interval after the midday meal, as Agnes and Eleanor worked together preserving berries, they exchange quiet conversation, sharing news of family members in nearby villages, discussing a fellow servant's upcoming marriage, speculating about changes in the household's fortunes. These stolen moments of connection provided essential social sustenance, transforming individuals bound by service into a community with shared knowledge and mutual support. The relationship between servants and those they served varied widely across medieval households. In smaller establishments, closer bonds might develop through daily proximity, servants becoming almost extensions of the family, trusted with confidences and occasionally treated with genuine affection. Larger households maintained greater distance between master and servant, with interactions mediated through hierarchies of specialized staff. In all cases, however, the fundamental inequality of the relationship remained unchallenged. Kindness might soften service, but did not transform its essential nature. This essential inequality manifested in various ways throughout servant life. Justice for servants operated differently than for their employers. A servant accused of theft faced harsher consequences than a family member taking the same item. Medical care during illness depended on the household's generosity rather than established right. Opportunities for marriage and family formation remained contingent on employer permission. The servant's body itself was subject to discipline, verbal correction certainly, sometimes physical punishment, in ways unacceptable for social equals. Yet medieval service was not slavery. Custom, and increasingly law, established certain protections and expectations for servants. Contracts, whether written for hire servants or verbal for ordinary staff, specified terms of employment, including food, lodging, payment, and duration of service. Religious teachings emphasized obligations of masters towards servants, fair treatment, provision of necessities, and recognition of their spiritual equality before God. Local communities often maintained informal oversight of servant treatment, with particularly abusive masters facing social censure. As afternoon progresses toward evening in our medieval household, Agnes focuses on dinner preparation. the day's most significant meal. The activity in the kitchen intensifies as multiple dishes are prepared simultaneously. This represents another overlooked aspect of medieval service, the considerable skill and knowledge required for seemingly basic tasks. Without standardized measures, precise timing devices, or temperature controls, servants relied on accumulated experience to achieve consistent results. This expertise, passed through generations of service, rarely received formal recognition despite its complexity. The evening meal complete, cleanup begins, another labor-intensive process in the medieval kitchen. Wooden trenchers must be scraped and scoured, metal serving pieces cleaned with sand and ash paste, floors swept of debris, and preparations made for the following day. Medieval servants worked not by the clock, but until tasks were completed, their days expanding or contracting based on household needs rather than defined hours. Only after the kitchen is returned to order can Agnes and her fellow servants enjoy their own more modest evening meal. This late supper represents one of the few periods when servants gather as a community rather than as workers. Seated on benches, in the kitchen or servant hall, they share food and conversation away from employer scrutiny. These moments reveal another dimension of servant life, the creation of their own social world, with distinct values and hierarchies that sometimes mirrored and sometimes subverted those of the main household. Status among servants might derive from different factors than in broader society. Skill, length of service, or even storytelling ability could confer respect within this parallel community. The servant community maintained its own traditions, humor, and methods of resistance against the constraints of their position. Tales passed among servants offered coded criticism of masters' behavior, or celebrated clever servant triumphs without directly challenging authority. Small acts of passive resistance, working slowly when unfairly treated, sharing extra food with fellow servants, maintaining secret knowledge about household events, created space for limited autonomy within fundamentally unequal relationships. With evening deepening into night, servants prepare the household for sleep. Beds are warmed with heated pans, candles lit in chambers, and security measures checked. For Agnes, these final tasks of the day carry particular significance. They represent the transition from the visible labor of daylight hours to the invisible, work that continues even while others rest. Throughout medieval households, some servants remained partially alert, even during night hours, ready to respond to emergency or employer needs, regardless of personal exhaustion. Before seeking her own rest, Agnes performs one final task, checking supplies for the morning bread that must be started before dawn. This constant forward planning characterized effective service. The medieval servant lived always slightly in the future, anticipating needs before they arose. This temporal orientation, this perpetual readiness, represents another uncounted cost of service beyond physical labor. The servant's mind remained always partially occupied with the next task, the next requirement, the next day's demands. As Agnes finally retires to her pallet, she carries with her the bodily evidence of her day's labor. Hands reddened from hot water and harsh soaps, small burns from cooking fires, the deep fatigue of constant movement. Medieval service wrote itself on the body in permanent ways, the rounded shoulders of someone who spent decades bending to others' needs, the thickened skin from repetitive tasks, the particular calluses that identified one specific form of service even more clearly than clothing or title. Her body also carries knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of proper techniques, time management, resource conservation, and human management that made her service valuable. This knowledge remained largely unrecorded in written texts, transmitted instead through direct demonstration and physical practice. Medieval servants like Agnes possessed enormous practical expertise that sustained daily life, but left few historical traces precisely because it resided in bodies and practices rather than documents. The life possibilities available to servants varied significantly by gender, specific role, and individual circumstance. Some, particularly male servants with specialized skills, might eventually establish independent households or businesses using knowledge gained through service. Female servants like Agnes faced more limited options, perhaps marriage to another servant if permitted, continued service until physically unable to perform required tasks, or in fortunate cases, retention as pensioners in the household after active service ended. The medieval servants' future, like their present, remained largely determined by others' decisions rather than personal choice. For many servants, the cycle of service began in childhood and continued throughout life. Children might enter service as young as 7 years old, beginning with simple tasks and gradually assuming more responsibility. This early integration into service culture shaped identity formation. Many servants knew no other life, their sense of self inseparable from their role in maintaining others' comfort and status. The modern concept of career as distinct from personal identity would have seemed foreign to those whose entire existence unfolded within service relationships. Loyalty formed an expected virtue of good service, with many servants remaining with a single household for decades or even lifetimes. This loyalty sometimes received recognition through small bequests in employers' wills or provision for old age, though such security remained dependent on individual generosity rather than established right. Long-serving staff might develop deep emotional investments in household fortunes, taking pride in the family's successes and internalizing their values even while remaining fundamentally separate from full membership in the family itself. The tensions inherent in this position, being simultaneously inside and outside the family unit, created complex psychological dynamics rarely captured in historical records. Servants witnessed the most intimate moments of employers' lives: births, deaths, conflicts, celebrations, while maintaining professional distance. They possessed detailed knowledge of family secrets while projecting ignorance. They might raise children who would eventually command them as masters. This liminality, this existence at the threshold between inclusion and exclusion, defined the medieval servant experience. As night settles fully over the medieval household, most servants have finally found their way to brief rest. Their sleep remains lighter than that of those they serve, conditioned by years of responding to bells or calls, attentive to household sounds even in slumber. Morning will come quickly, with its renewal of the service cycle that structures their existence. This rhythm, this constant pattern of attending to others' needs, represents not simply a job but an entire way of being in the medieval world. Historical understanding of these lives remains fragmentary precisely because the ideal servant left, minimal traces in the record. Their success manifested as absence, problems solved before becoming visible, needs met without explicit request, labor that concealed itself in its results. The most effective service created an illusion that household comfort occurred naturally rather than through continuous human effort. This invisibility, cultivated during life, has extended into historical memory, obscuring the essential role servants played in creating the medieval world we study. The experiences of servants like Agnes offer a profound counterpoint to romantic. Visions of medieval life focused on knights, ladies, and dramatic historical events. Their stories remind us that history unfolds not just in battlefield decisions and royal proclamations, but in countless small actions performed by those whose names rarely appear in chronicles. The hands that fed, cleaned, maintained, and enabled the daily existence of an entire society. When Agnes rises before dawn tomorrow, her first thought will be the bread dough that must be prepared, not her place in history. Yet in her routine actions, in her careful management of household resources, in her transmission of practical knowledge to younger servants, she participates in the creation and maintenance of medieval culture, as surely as any scribe copying manuscripts or mason carving cathedral stone. The medieval world stood upon the foundation of such service, unacknowledged, essential, human. As we drift away from this sleeping household, leaving Agnes and her fellow servants to their brief rest, we carry with us a deeper appreciation for these overlooked lives. The medieval servant, moving quietly through grand halls and humble cottages alike, offers us a different window into historical experience, one focused not on exceptional moments, but on the quotidian labor that made all other activities possible. In recognizing their significance, we begin to see the medieval world more completely, populated not just by the figures who dominated the historical record, but by the countless individuals whose service created the very possibility of that record's existence. The lives of medieval servants remind us that history always contains these dual narratives, the visible accomplishments celebrated in traditional accounts and the invisible labor that enabled those accomplishments. By attending to the experiences of those who served, we recover a fuller understanding of medieval society, its complex interdependencies, its daily rhythms, its embodied knowledge, and its profound inequalities. In the quiet darkness of Agnes's sleeping chamber, we find not just an individual story, but a window into the foundational relationships that structured an entire world. Thank you for spending this quiet time with us, drifting through forgotten echoes of history. If this story brought you peace, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs rest. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well, dream softly, and good night.